Now let's look at basic Java syntax. And this is not a course on Java, it's a course on mobile app development for Android, but we'll be doing a fair amount of Java this term. So my goal in life at this point is to get you through this course knowing just enough Java to be successful. And if you've already taken 133J or 233J, then you're going to be in really excellent shape in this course. But if you haven't, this primer should help you. So first, I'm going to show you where the Java lives. So under app, there's a Java folder, and then you'll see your package name and your app name, and then main activity. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And this is a .java file. It's mainActivity.java. And let me walk you through the parts really quickly. So at the top is this package line, and that basically says what project this file is part of, where it lives, and then you have some imports. And anytime you see highlighted green, that means that some stuff has been collapsed in the editor. And so you can open that to see what's inside, or close it if you want something that's a little more concise. So let's go ahead and open it. And you'll see there's some import lines, and the import has basically a path and then the name of a class. And usually these are either going to be built-in parts of the Android software development kit, or there'll be other classes that you define inside of your project. So here's one for action bar activity, which this particular project is using. And there's one for bundle, which is used here. There's one for menu, which is used here, and one for menu item, which is used here. So these are basically class definitions, and a class is a template for a set of objects. And everything in Java, almost everything, is an object. So objects have two things. They have properties and they have methods. So properties are things you know about the object, like numbers and strings and sets of values and things like that. And methods are little bits of code that you can run on an object. And the classes that are pre-bundled with Android Studio can be used in your project pretty easily just by importing them and then using them in your code. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse all of these methods so that we can see sort of the overall structure of a class definition. So this whole thing is one class definition. And it starts with public, which means that any piece of code anywhere that imports my main activity can create an object of this type. So the class type is main activity, and then I can create a new main activity object that inherits all of this stuff that's defined for the class. So public means anybody can access it and create it. Private means only things inside the class can refer to main activity. Then you have the keyword class, which says that we're going to be creating a class. You have the name of the class that we're creating. This one's called main activity. And then this extends keyword is optional. So if you have extends, that means that this main activity is based on another class. So there's something called action bar activity, which is imported here. And this defines a bunch of properties and methods for an action bar activity. By saying main activity extends action bar activity, that means my new class, my main activity class, is going to get all of the methods and properties that are defined for action bar activity. So that's how inheritance works. We say main activity inherits properties and methods from action bar activity. Then you have an open curly bracket here and a closing curly bracket at the end. And everything that goes inside of here is going to be either a property or a method or a subclass of my main activity class. So let's look at a method. So here's what a method looks like. And this is a chunk of code that's going to get run either when I call it or when the operating system calls it. And this onCreate thing, there's a method built into action bar activity But I'm defining a custom one for main activity that's a little different. It's going to do some additional stuff. So that's what this override means. @override means that onCreate is defined inside of action bar activity, but I want to override that by defining my own version of onCreate for main activity. So protected is like public and private. Protected means any subclass I create that inherits from main activity can also call this method. This is a return value from the method. So on create, when I run this piece of code, I can optionally return a value. And that value that I return is going to have a particular type. Void means nothing. So by saying protected void, what I'm doing is saying that onCreate is not going to return any value at all. It's going to return nothing. Then here's the name of the method and some values that I can pass in when I call the method. So this particular one takes one parameter called saved instance state, and the type of this parameter is bundle. So in Java, by convention, pretty much anytime you see a capital letter here, camel case, with uppercase letter for each word, that's going to mean you're looking at a class or a type. So main activity is a class, and you can tell that because it starts with a capital M and capital A. Bundle is another class because it starts with a capital B. And then methods and properties and variable names are all going to start with lowercase camel case. So lowercase o means that this is just a method. Lowercase s means that this is just a parameter or variable that I'm passing in. So here's a method that takes one parameter called saved instance state of type bundle. And the first thing it does is it calls the onCreate method of super. And super is the parent class of action bar activity. So what this is doing is it's calling the onCreate method of this class, and it's passing in the thing that we passed into it. So basically the first thing our version of onCreate is going to do is whatever the parent version of onCreate is doing. And then we're going to call this other method called setContentLayout, and we're going to pass it a resource identifier. So this r.layout.activityMain, that corresponds to resources layout activityMain.xml. All the stuff in the XML file that we looked at in the basic XML tutorial, that's going to be passed in to setContentView. So what this is actually doing is it's saying when you create the new activity, you're going to go ahead and set the content of that activity to match this layout. And this particular method on create, it's going to get called by the operating system when our app starts. Here's another method. This also gets called by the operating system. It's public, so the operating system can call it. This one actually returns a Boolean value, which is true or false. So return true, returning a Boolean value. The name of this method is onCreateOptionsMenu. There's one of those defined in action bar activity as well. So we have @override to show that we're overriding the one in action bar activity. And this one also takes one parameter. It takes a menu parameter of type menu. So this is actually pretty common where you'll see menu written in lowercase as the name of a variable or a property, and menu written in uppercase as the name of the type. So the first thing, and if you want to add comments to your Java code, you can use / to comment one line. You can also do this. So I'm going to type /*, return, and then this is going to be a doc string that I can use to add information. and it's automatically going to comment the next one, and so on. And there's some additional syntax for doc strings that are used for automatically generating documentation pages, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So that's how you write a comment, and you can tell it's a comment because it's a little gray. So onCreateOptions menu takes a menu parameter. It calls a method called getMenuInflator, and this thing is going to return an object, and then it's going to call the inflate method on that object. Whatever object this thing returns, we're going to call the inflate method, and we're going to pass in another resource, r.menu.menuUnderMain, which corresponds to resources menu menuUnderMain.xml, so another XML file. And it takes a second parameter, menu, which is what we passed into the method. Finally, it's going to return the value true, which is type Boolean. Once again, this method is going to be called by the operating system when it starts up our app. So first it's going to set the layout for our activity in onCreate. Then it's going to set the menu for the action bar. We'll learn more about that next week when we get to action bars. And here's one more method that you get as boilerplate. This is public as well, so the operating system can call it. It returns a Boolean value, true or false. The name of the method is onOptionsItemSelected. It takes one parameter named item, which is of type menuItem, some comments, and then here's how you declare a local variable. So this is a variable that's local to this method. It only exists from this point here where I declare it and set its initial value down to the end of the method. Anywhere else, this thing doesn't exist. ID doesn't exist. So from here to here, it exists and I can use it. Anywhere else, if I tried to refer to this, I'd get an error. This is the type. It's an integer, which is a whole number. This is the name, ID. So this is saying create a new integer value named ID, and then set its initial value to take this item thing here, which is an object, call the getItemID method on it. Don't pass in any values. Whatever this thing returns, that's going to get stored in this ID variable. And then we're going to use an if statement, and we're going to compare ID equal to r.id.actionSettings. So 1 equal means assignment. Take this value here, store it in this variable. 2 equals means comparison. So compare this value to this value, which is a number. If they match, return true. If they don't match, then I'm going to drop out of this if statement and go to the next line. I'm going to call the onOptionsItemSelected method of the parent class, pass in the item that I got passed, and whatever this thing returns, that's what I'm going to return for my method. And this is also run by the operating system, but this particular method actually gets run when you touch a button in the action bar. So we'll be seeing more about this Java as we move through the course, but that's a quick primer. The important things to note if you haven't worked in a C family language like Java or C# or PHP before is blocks of statements are enclosed by curly brackets like so. So here's a block of statements. These always have to match. And type, variable name, and then assignment. Here's the value that gets calculated and stored in here. Comparison. Here's a value that's being compared with this value. So that should be enough to get started for this week, and we'll be looking at more syntax as we move through the course.